This video started off as something very different. 2 weeks ago I'd set myself on a course to make a video about the divine feminine, and with every sentence I wrote, I had this awful realization. There was almost nothing I could say that wouldn't enrage either one side or the other side of the political spectrum, or even both sides sometimes. So I decided to shelve the topic yet again, but unlike previous times when I've just suppressed the topic and thought of something else to talk about, this time I want to address the issue of how unhelpful politics are in the pursuit of knowledge, so that I can finally move on to more constructive topics. Okay, so let me start off with a little groundwork. I think of people as complex beings, a combination of many different facets. Hopefully this is going to seem obvious to most people. A plumber goes home after a day at work and engages video game streaming superstar mode, or crochet aficionado mode, or loving partner mode, or ceremonial magic practitioner mode. All of these modes, or none, and definitely many more besides. This is obvious. We are multifaceted beings. But there's this one specific situation where, by default, we forget that we're multifaceted beings. See how familiar this sounds. You see someone who has developed great maturity, even mastery, in one area of their development. An accomplished musician, an acclaimed actor, a spiritual guru, a genius entrepreneur. Now, for some reason, the default assumption before you consciously think about it is that they most probably have this same level of maturity and mastery in every area of their lives. It's a well-recognized phenomenon, and it's called the halo effect, where if someone makes a good first impression, you're going to assume that they are most likely to impress you in every aspect of their life. But when you take a second to actually think about it, it becomes obvious that that can't be the case. Each area has to be developed individually, and mastery in one area is most likely to have no correlation with most other areas. If you work really hard on your mathematical thinking, it's not going to automatically make you better at relating to animals. But when we see a person who has developed one area of their cognitive lives to a high degree of perfection, we expect them to have the entire rest of their lives in order too. And then, when it inevitably turns out that they don't, because of course they don't, who does? But when it turns out that they don't, the unthinking impulse is to reject their entire being as being flawed. If you're not completely perfect, then you must be completely flawed. And that advice you have on that area of life that you've perfected, it isn't worth listening to. The truth is that people are built of many facets, and usually when one facet is perfectly honed and polished to perfection, it comes at the expense of many other facets. Sometimes that facet that's been neglected will be relationships. Sometimes it'll be intuitive thinking. Sometimes it'll be logical thinking. And sometimes it'll be politics. But in any case, the default instinct is for any flaw to be unforgivable. I'll talk a little later about why we have this instinct and why it's not actually an altogether unhealthy instinct to have as a default. A bit like training wheels on a bicycle are a good idea at first, and then it's also a good idea to get rid of them after a while. But you have to decide to do that yourself, and then you have to get the right tools to do that. And it takes courage, and it also takes a few moments of your conscious time, just like taking off training wheels. Ken Wilber, probably the most famous American philosopher currently alive, certainly the most widely published and translated, famously wrote an 800-page opus called Sex, Ecology, Spirituality, which I thoroughly recommend, where he describes the various areas of development that exist in a human, and he describes the different levels of development in each area. It's fascinating stuff. There's no question that it's a very helpful, very useful map to have. As I think I've mentioned before, and pardon the blatant self-promotion coming up here, but I think it's relevant to our conversation, one of the main perks of joining the Foolish Fish membership is that members get access to the Foolish Fish Discord chat server, where they get to chat with me when I'm available and with each other. You can find out more about that in the description. Now, why is this relevant to this video? There are 10 rules on this Foolish Fish Discord chat server. When a new member joins for the first time, an administrator will invariably ask new joining members to read through these rules very thoroughly before they start asking or responding to questions there. The rules are pretty strict. In fact, I think I semi-joke within the rules themselves that I think that they're dictatorial. But they keep trolls at bay, and they keep conversations constructive, and members safe from judgmental opinions. It's simple things, like don't give advice if advice isn't specifically requested. If you make a claim that isn't common knowledge, give a source, even if that source is a dream you had, that kind of thing. One of the rules, in fact probably one of the most strongly emphasized rules, is the no politics rule. My wording goes like this. The world is missing a platform where people can exchange political views in a meaningful, civilized, constructive way. This is not that platform. Please avoid the subject at all costs. If a fight breaks out over a political issue, the person who started the conversation will be kicked out regardless of their political position. Anyone responding to such incitement is quite likely to be kicked out too. There are two reasons why I created this rule. Naturally, the primary purpose of this rule is to remove the number one source of online bickering, which is political disagreement. Otherwise intelligent, mature, considerate people suddenly release aspects of themselves that they sometimes didn't even know existed when politics become involved. It's unpleasant, it's intimidating for many, and is just not compatible with the relaxed, friendly yet thoughtful atmosphere we all work so hard to maintain there. But the second reason for this rule, and it's probably the most important reason, is that it gets in the way of learning. Someone may have exactly the bit of information that you were missing to help an aspect of your practice click or come to life. They might possess the exact words you needed to hear to get that light bulb moment where suddenly everything makes sense. But they have opposing political views. In fact, you see their political views as a real threat to society as a whole and to you personally. And so those few words of insight that would have been so perfect for your own growth, they go unheard. All because you perceived what you consider to be a flaw in one area of their cognitive life. And in your mind, that imperfection has spread to encompass the entire being, and therefore opinions on all subjects, political or not. The halo effect works both ways. Don't get me wrong, I'm guilty of this myself. There's a particular mid-20th century occultist who has a lot to say about spiritism and telepathy and alchemy, and I just can't bring myself to read his work due to the fact that he also wrote extensively about what a great guy Heinrich Himmler was, and has basically been heralded as the main voice for Italian fascism and neo-fascism since the Second World War, even rejecting the title of fascist because he was, in his own words, a super-fascist. His thoughts on alchemy, for example, would surely make for an interesting read. I just don't want to read it from him. So don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting that it's an easy task to overcome this natural generalization of imperfection when we've spotted a single point of imperfection. It's hard. It takes work. And there are cases, like the one I just described in my case, where overcoming that dislike is just too hard. I try not to beat myself up over it, you can't win them all, but I do like to push my limits because the real gems, the real pearls of wisdom, are sometimes found in the most repulsive cesspools. If we can't learn to be the kind of person who can retrieve those pearls, then we have to expect to put up with publicly available, low-hanging fruit which may be good enough for some, but it's certainly not good enough for me. And if you've watched this video so far, it's possible that it's not good enough for you either. So what can we do to train ourselves, to get better at the rather stinky job of pearl retrieving, to eventually get those training wheels off? Well, there's another popular author, though probably not popular enough in my opinion, who has also explored this subject. His name may be familiar to some seasoned psychonauts out there. It's Robert Anton Wilson. His book Prometheus Rising is a much shorter, much less reverent book than Ken Wilber's, but all the more impact for it actually. He gives the reader little exercises to perform at the end of every chapter to drive his point home about what he calls reality tunnels, which are sets of beliefs and assumptions that affect a person's entire perception of reality. That's a fun concept in itself, definitely fun to play with, when you realize that you can switch tunnels at will, albeit for short periods of time, as long as you allow yourself to. Some examples of the exercises he proposes go like this. Become a pious Roman Catholic. Explain in 3 pages why the Church is still infallible and holy despite popes like Alexander VI, the Borgia Pope, Pius XII, ally of Hitler, etc. Another one goes, imagine yourself into the headspace of a dogmatic rationalist. Analyze all synchronicities as mere coincidence. And then the next one goes, imagine yourself into the headspace of an occultist. Analyze all synchronicities as an omen. What does it mean? Jungians say synchronicities contain messages from the deep structures of the collective mind. What is the message? And then another one goes, become a Nazi for 33 minutes. Believe that all politics is a matter of strength, stealth and treachery. That all liberalism is folly. Plan a campaign to take over the world by force and fraud. I don't think it matters on which side of the political spectrum you fall. There should probably be at least 1 or 2 exercises there that should pose a significant challenge if you're doing this kind of thing for the first time. That's because the adhesive that glues us to our own reality tunnel is very strong, very hard to break. That adhesive is taboos, those thoughts that we're conditioned to never approach, conditioned by society, by our environment, by our family, and also by our chosen beliefs. Now, those taboos that make it so hard for us to experiment with other reality tunnels, they're there for a good reason. Good biological reason, that is. They keep us safe when we're not thinking. And that's actually most of the time, even for the most thoughtful of us, because we're only ever thinking about 1 up to, let's say, at a stretch, 7 things at any given time. Turns out there's a gap between 7 things and everything. So, yes, at any given time, most things are not being thought of. We can make decisions that we can assume are safe based on those taboos. So no, I'm not suggesting that we get rid of taboos. They're very useful. I'd go as far as to say that they're vital. I am suggesting we recognize them for what they are, and we dare to at least examine them and even practice swapping them for short periods of time as an exercise in order to experience reality in different ways, which can sometimes be very insightful, not always pleasant, but helpful in understanding other people's thought processes. No one's saying we have to stick with that world map for the rest of our lives, thank heavens. My guess is that if we spent a little bit more time, a little more regularly, trying out other people's reality tunnels, not to permanently adopt them, but just to experience what it's like living from within it, it would unlock conversations that we never even knew could happen. And as we all know, conversations lead to knowledge, and knowledge is what we're ultimately all after. Thank you so much for spending some time listening to me today. I know it's a difficult topic. Please remember to be respectful to each other in the comments section. If you feel that the video deserves a like, I hope you'll consider clicking that like button and even subscribing if you haven't already. These Esoteric Saturday videos are currently happening every 2 weeks, and members get to see them a week in advance with no advertisements during that week. Members also get to join the Discord chat server where we discuss all kinds of esoteric topics. Speaking of members, I'd like to extend my thanks to all of you who support this channel, and in particular I'd like to thank the level 3 members, the Magister Venerabilis members, being Ricardo Colomé, Nia the Arianach, R.A. Skill YO, Aristarchus, Virgil Aurelius, Oscudle in Tin, Amanda Mayer, Ferion 1, Justin Lloyd, Raoul Nair, King Rainbow, Eleonora F., Jorge Salas, Luis Mancilia, Ian Smith, Osvaldo González Núñez, Fernando Martín del Campo, Robert Mahoney, Alvin A., Jason, Frater VPF, Byron Marmol, W.A., Frater D. Lane, A Million Ways to Wipe, Alexander Carval, Sheridan, Brandon Wilkinson, Andrew Kudlak, Mateusz Sadowski, Chase Lawrence, Mrs. C.Y., Medusa of Chaos, Seidr, Matu, Mystic Imagination,
Merrily Duffy, Meta Gordy, Damnatio Memoriae, Suncat, Ted Kaiser, J. Joseph Safi, Kyle Walker, Roluch Ashron, Charbon, Patrick, Arcantum by Mr. Friborg, Mr. Gunwich, The Jade Ghost, Timothy Owens, SMQAI, and Z. Daniel Barnett. Thank you so much for watching, and see you very soon with another video.